We're going to start this morning off with a proclamation. And so I am going to go to the podium and I'm going to ask, looks like Lynn Heemstra to join me. Quinn is here.
Oh, you already know Quinn.
All right. I do know Quinn. We spent some time together. Quinn is a potential future city commissioner or mayor, folks.
Right.
Might have to introduce you to him. So I have a proclamation to read with you this morning for Lights On for after school. And I'll read the proclamation, then I'll turn it to Lynn, and we'll have a few words, and then maybe we'll come up here. I don't know if Quinn's going to say a few words, but he's welcome to. And then we'll get moving with our agenda. So here's the proclamation. Whereas research shows that children who regularly attend after-school programs improve their self-confidence, school performance, and school attendance. And whereas after-school programs are a significant crime prevention strategy for youth, offering positive and engaging activities. And whereas these programs require community investment from all sectors to ensure that quality after school for children is sustained. And whereas the City of Grand Rapids is committed to supporting quality after-school programs that provide recreational, social, and academic opportunities for children and youth where they can learn, thrive, and be safe. Whereas the Expanded Learning Opportunities Network provides these critical programs for children and youth throughout our city. Now, therefore, I, Rosalind Bliss, Mayor of the City of Grand Rapids, do hereby proclaim October 26, 2017 as Lights On After School Day in Grand Rapids. And I urge all of our citizens to support the national day that shines a light on the importance of after-school programs.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support of after-school programs. These are critical to help children succeed academically, socially, and certainly for their futures. With that, I have with me a partner, Rosie Holmes, who is the new director of the Office of Extended Learning. Together, we're going to be featuring a Lights On event at Coit School on Thursday from 4:30 to 5:30, and Commissioner Lanier will be there to speak, as well as Jack Greenfield, the chair of the ELO network. So I encourage you all to come for that. I'm going to turn it over to Rosie.
Good morning. It is an honor to be able to partner with Expanded Learning Opportunities. I am so glad to be here. We are excited to be celebrating Lights On After School. We know that it's important that we have safe, quality after-school programs for our students to help inspire them to learn. And we are excited to be a part of this opportunity. As Lynn said, we will be celebrating Lights On October 26th at Court Academy at 4:30 p.m. I have with me one of our parents from Court, Miss Summer, and we also have Quinn, and they're going to come and speak as a parent and as a student.
Good morning. My name is Summer Wright. I am a resident of Grand Rapids, and I moved here from North Carolina, saw what the schools were doing, and decided I had to stay, even though the winters made this very far on the bottom of my list initially. I fell in love with Grand Rapids Public Schools and all of the innovation that was happening within the school. My older son attended Loop and is now at Museum School. My younger son is still in Loop and on his way to City, he hopes. I work full-time as a development director for a local nonprofit working with children with disabilities. And without the support of Loop, I would not have been able to pursue that work to help other children in our community and to help make an impact and give back to what the city has done for me. So without Loop, I wouldn't be able to function as a person, is what I've said repeatedly. So thank you for supporting the program.
Quinn, you want to say a few words?
Okay. I'm Quinn, and I've been going to Loop for 5 years now, and I think it's an amazing program. I would have flunked so many tests without it. My mother always has to work pretty late, and I'm always able to stay at Loop so that I don't have to stay at home by myself. And I really don't know what I would do without Loop. It's amazing. I love it, and all the people there are so amazing too. Miss Kim, I don't know which one. Oh, there's Miss Kim, Miss Walker, Miss Green, and so many other amazing people. And I love Loop, and I don't know what I would do without it.
All right. Well, Quinn, it's good to see you. Can we get a picture? All right. I like the tie. All right. Roll Coit. Roll Quinn.
Thank you so
All
much,
right,
Mayor.
Quinn, good to see you again.
She said quickly.
Quickly. Oh, yes, absolutely.
He's my buddy. I'm going to miss him next year.
Okay. Smile.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Lanier, so much for filling in. And Commissioners, you may remember Quinn. He spoke at Kids Speak last year, did a fantastic job. All right, next that will take us to our agenda before us today. And the very first thing on our agenda is a resolution authorizing an MOU with Canal Street Brewing Company. All right, and Tom Almane, you want to tell us about this? We've talked a little bit about this in the past, but why don't you fill us in on the details?
Yes, Mayor, Commissioner. This item is, as you know, is 2 steps that we're taking to address the demand at the plant. One is to build a pipeline for customers that are close to the plant. In this case, the MOU is with Founders. There will be other customers that will be able to tap into that pipe. And the idea behind that is to manage the flow that goes into the plant. The concentrated waste that will be coming through that plant, we're going to a tank, a 1 million gallon tank, and then staff will time when the concentrated waste will be introduced into the plant to manage the demand to the plant. This is a 2-step. The next step is, as you know, we are in the process of building a biodigestion too on the plant, and that will be a step 2 in the process that we're taking. So, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And I have the expert behind me, Mike.
All right, so Commissioners, any questions? We've talked about this for some time. This is related to our biodigester, but also we want to be a great city where people who are manufacturing food or drinks can grow in our city without having additional costs. So we came up with this win-win situation. Any questions or comments for Tom or Mike? All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, Commissioners, just to let you know, item 2 has been taken off of our agenda, and so we will not be voting on that today due to a sale of that property, is my understanding. So that will take us to the 3rd item, and this is a presentation of Stormwater Program recognition by Water Environment Federation.
So moved.
Support.
All right. Kerry?
Good morning. Earlier this month at the annual conference for the Water Environment Federation, the city was awarded with the award that's being passed around. It is for recognizing gold level status of our stormwater program in both program management and in innovation. We filled out a 13-page application for this last fall, and they chose us based mostly on where we go above and beyond. Some of the highlights of it are meeting basics, relationship with your governing body, which is the Department of Environmental Quality, and then some of the exciting things are, what changes we've done to support green infrastructure, and one of the big ones was including green in our Vital Streets plan. And one of the really nice things we were able to highlight is that American Rivers actually went through our codes a few years ago to see what we needed to change to really incentivize green infrastructure and to take away the barriers. And they really had minimal comments because we were always already doing these things. Alternative financing was a big one, and for us, we don't have any stormwater fees like many other communities across the country. And so the fact that we did our transformation of the city and used some of the funds for that, and again, taking money for green infrastructure with the streets program were some of our innovative processes for that. I think the final thing was interdepartmental coordination. And that's hands down when I have somebody from traffic safety who's saying, well, I saw these bike medians and they didn't have any inlets to let the stormwater in. And we've got somebody in planning who knows the stormwater program almost as good as I do. It's just a joy to be able to get things done because everybody works together and we all know what everyone's doing. So with the combination, what our leaders have done for the city to allow us to have funding and our partners from other departments, thank you for everybody for helping our program.
Commissioners, any questions for Kerry?
No, I just want to shout out to Kerry and the department for all the work you've done in stormwater. It was great that we were able to get the support of the public for the parks millage and the income tax extension, and then coordinate those efforts so that we can do a lot more green infrastructure as well as the stuff that we don't see but that is also so critically important for the city. So thank you for your work on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Commissioners, next that will take us to our next item, and that is a presentation on the bicycle transportation plan development. So Ms. Bennett here with us. Welcome.
This is old school here.
Old school.
Looks like Mr. Miller.
You read my mind. We allow them by city staff.
I couldn't resist. That was kind of low.
Get down to my level here. Kristin Bennett, I'm the Transportation Planning Supervisor for the city. And what we're going to do is do an overview of, we were requested to develop a bicycle transportation plan for the city, kind of following on the heels of both Vital Streets and GR4, to kind of drill that down in a little more detail. So we were tasked with that starting this summer, trying to build on the groundwork that we set with Vital Streets, the GR4 plan that covers downtown, and then, of course, Driving Change, which has done a lot of research and analysis surrounding bicycle safety, bicycle crashes, and also the community's understanding and knowledge of the rules and responsibilities, regardless of whether they're driving or bicycling. So the idea is to try to get a bicycle plan that can kind of cover the full range of topics, not just the lines on the map for riding facilities, but all the things that go into making bicycling work, whether it's for transportation, recreation, whatever purpose people want to use this mode of transportation or mode of travel. So education and safety, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation and asset management of what we put out there. And the goal also is to have sort of relevant and responsive and actionable recommendations that actually can push forward into being projects and programs, whether by the city or with partners in the community. So we started going back and actually looking where we started. We've started talking about bicycling back in the city's master plan, in the balanced transportation chapter, the desire to have more travel options, that they're safe travel options, and that, but again, it was sort of the focus was on the lines on the map predominantly. We also had an effort internally to develop a bicycle and facilities plan. It was never really adopted, but it was sort of a starting conversation internally. And then kind of the big jump happened in about 2010, where there were some staff assigned efforts. There was a desire to really start putting designated bike facilities besides just trails onto the ground. And so 16 miles of bike lanes were identified, and those sort of moved forward using sort of opportunistic strategies of road paving projects, much like we still do today, but it was the first efforts to have actual designated facilities on the street. Again, we started talking about bicycling in Green Grand Rapids. That was a bigger conversation because it did, of course, talk about riding facilities, but it also said that there needed to be other things going along with it, education, enforcement, and how do you actually support people riding, whether it's bicycle skills training and outreaching into the community. So it didn't just focus on those lines on the map. We, of course, were fairly early in passing some complete streets legislation in 2011. We started moving through that process of sustainable streets, which again kept focusing on those themes that we need a transportation system that works for everybody. And then, of course, that's leading into the major effort of Vital Streets. And Vital Streets focused on creating that process between green streets and complete streets, but again, kept focusing on the need to create an accessible transportation network, regardless of what kind of mode you choose to travel with or modes. In many cases, people like to choose multiple ways of getting around the community. And so you've probably are very familiar with all the maps. Of course, we had the sort of Vital Streets types, whether they're the residential or the urban center or the crosstown connector type streets. But then there was the effort to move to sort of a mode emphasis with ones that were either transit streets or ones that were focused on truck or vehicular, and some were prioritized, of course, as bicycle priority streets, whether they were focused on commuting or sort of community type uses. These are just our ward breakdowns of those kind of recommendations, Ward 2 and then Ward 3. So where are we at? A lot has changed. I grew up here and used to ride a lot with not a lot of facilities. So a lot has changed since I returned a year ago. We've obviously had our complete street policy. We started assigning some staff time. In 2012, we had about 20 plus miles of bike lanes designated. That first active commute week, we had a bike map, and we first received a bronze designation for bicycle-friendly communities, which is a national recognition. Where we're at today, about 5 years later, is that we've almost quadrupled the amount of on-street facilities that we have. We have one of the first cycle tracks in the state of Michigan up on Monroe. We have trails, of course, off-street. There's bike racks on all the buses that travel throughout the city. We're starting to get more bike parking through various mechanisms, and we have more people bike commuting. It's actually coming out in our statistics nationally. And so we've looked at that. We have those existing bike facilities. This is sort of citywide, Ward 1, Ward 2, and Ward 3. But still, you can see sort of there's a lot of disconnects in terms of trying to make that a true network. And so that was sort of the desire of getting behind a much more detailed bike plan. Some other aspects of where we are today, we have driving change, which was extremely innovative and very effective. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and we've been out doing a lot of community outreach right now for our bike share feasibility study, and people often remark about driving change. They're very aware of the messaging. We were the first to have a 5-foot passing law. We also have continue to grow with Active Commute Week. We have bicycle-friendly businesses and universities now, not just the city having its bronze level designation. So we have a culture that's growing around bicycling, much like in other cities around the United States. And we also have it mentioned in even more plans, such as our GR Forward plan, our Parks Master Plan, of course, was covering trail components. And there's new planning initiatives underway. I mentioned the bike share study that we're in the middle of, definitely in the throes of it right now. There's the river trail guidelines that are being led through DGRI and the engineering department. And then DGRI is also kicking off some downtown streetscape guidelines, and bicycle elements will be part of that. Yet we still have that Bronze Bicycle Friendly Communities Award. We did reapply in August, so we're just waiting to see if we've moved up a notch, although the bar continues to get set higher. So we haven't started a true public outreach for doing a plan, but we are asking general bicycle questions as part of our bike share study. What we've been hearing is a lot. Assistant City Manager asked me to bring some maps. I actually brought maps from a meeting we did just last Thursday, and people just talked to us, and we'd write Post-it notes. This just happens, I think the first one's maybe Third Ward. People were popping Post-it notes, and this is just from one meeting. And so there's a general appreciation that we've made a good start, but there's a desire for something more comprehensive, and there's a desire to have bicycling being sort of throughout kind of all those elements that they talked about, sort of the 5 E's: education, engineering, enforcement, evaluation, and encouragement. What we're also hearing is that there's a need to really bring that connectivity together between bikeways to get to in places like people want to go, whether it's work, schools, recreational facilities. They want to connect with adjacent communities, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, but having those relationships with adjacent communities. They have concerns a lot about some major physical barriers: bridges, rivers, the freeways. Railroads, how do we get around those that create these impediments to connectivity? Of course, everybody loves trails. They like to see more of that. They like to see better connections, year-round access to trails. And there's an overriding concern about bicycling with traffic and the anxiety of more distracted driving, people not paying attention. I even had a woman tell me at an event that she and her 10-year-old were yelled at, and so they just wanted to stop riding, being yelled at by adults in cars, which is concerning. And they're recognizing that sidewalk riding is a problem, but they often admit that they go to the sidewalk because that's the only place they feel safe. So key areas we want to address that Vital Streets and other plans haven't addressed is trying to identify the type of standalone projects, bicycle projects we have. Vital Streets, of course, was a street network plan, so it didn't cover off-street trails and trail connections and trail access. And it didn't drill down to things like intersections and crossings and underpasses, overpasses that might be necessitate for connectivity. The mode overlay is really helpful, but there's no like high, medium, low priority as to what direction should we head first or where and what connections should we be making first. And I think the other thing is that we have the opportunity, are there existing bike facilities that should be upgraded for safety or other kind of connectivity improvements that might be shown on Vital Streets, but that we need to make those identifications. What other types of corridors might not be necessarily identified in Vital Streets that could be good options to create connectivity, and then what kind of connections into adjacent communities, because we kept hearing that loud and clear. We need to get to and from, whether it's Wyoming, Kentwood, East Grand Rapids, Walker, they want to get to other places for work or other purposes. Likewise, Vital Streets, we engaged at a different level in terms of conversations, and it didn't necessarily cover those other aspects outside streets. And so what we've been learning from our process with Bike Share is that particularly going out to community events, we're getting a lot by going where people are, and we're going to a huge range of different types of events. We were at the Latino 5K this weekend, and then went to the Alger Pop-Up Market right afterwards, and getting a lot of interesting input by going out to people as opposed to trying to have meetings that they come to us. And I think we'd like to follow that process as well going forward. We can certainly use a lot of the goals that were established in Vital Streets, and as well as GR Forward for the downtown area. I think those are certainly good baseline goals to grow from and have people react to. And that we have a lot of current work that we've done that can feed into this plan. In particular, we did a 30-plus page application for that Bike-Friendly Communities application, which really sets the tone as to where we're at and can feed a lot of information into sort of an existing conditions of where the community stands right now. Plus, like I said, we're getting good engagement about bicycling in general with the Bike Share feasibility study that we're doing right now. So staff is recommending a kind of a plan outline that focuses on establishing first, kind of building off Vital Streets with those vision and values and those goals, doing that sort of existing conditions work, which we've got a lot accomplished already, and then kind of how we're currently investing in bicycling throughout the community and what things are in the pipeline. And then the other items would be how would the bicycle network be laid out, kind of in a more refined manner than Vital Streets lays out. Bicycle policies that might still need to be changed. We've changed a number associated with driving change, et cetera, but are there other ones that should be changed or updated? What kind of programs and services might be needed throughout the community? What kind of partners and other approaches to providing those could be recommended? Of course, performance measures, evaluation, and asset management is very important, and then also what kind of investment needs and strategies, not just for the city, but what types of funding we can leverage and other kind of partnerships. So that's sort of the suggested plan timeline, and then, or the plan outline and the plan timeline that staff's recommending is, again, try to finish a lot of that existing conditions work through the end of the year and early into 2018. Really do some additional focused public outreach. Again, I think following these sort of strategies we've used with the Bike Share study has been very effective. And then releasing a more complete draft plan, we're suggesting around June. That's when we do Bike Month here. We have Active Commute Week, and then we're actually hosting the state bicycle summit at Grand Valley this year. So we felt launching around that time might be a good opportunity to keep bicycling kind of in the forefront. So, questions, comments?
All right. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Jones?
No, just Kristin, kudos to you for the efforts of going to the community instead of hosting meetings in hopes that folks will show up. I just want to encourage you to continue to go far and wide, and be more than happy actually to have some conversations about, certain places you probably should be. And maybe you've hit them already, but just this idea of trying to get as much feedback and insight as possible from folks throughout the city. So,
Other questions, Commissioner?
Yes, I have a couple things. First of all, I'd love to get more information about Vision Zero. I'm excited about that. It's a national campaign.
That's actually coming up behind me. So.
Okay, well, I saw that actually on the agenda. That's right. We had a conversation this morning in CD about the CMAQ grant that we get, and and just getting a sense, especially when we get to figuring out what our certain routes will be, that tension between air quality mitigation, and emissions versus right turns. Mm-hmm. And maybe that will wind up being just in certain routes, I don't know, but that's a big educational piece too. Got a lot of people here around this table that served on the school board, and I'm a former educator, and those are the things that we keep on hearing about too. Those really still, even though we've done all these campaigns, a lot more work has to go into, maybe through the school system for one thing, on bike safety rules. And then I know that we want to start with education before we do enforcement, but I'm also hearing some concerns that for both sides of this, that both the automobiles and the bikes, that we start to maybe issue some tickets once in a while, because I know our bicyclists I see them going through intersections and it's so dangerous, and they need to follow the rules as well. And then my last question is, do we need to start thinking about cell phones and doing something around an ordinance around cell phones in the city, because clearly that's one of the biggest things that causes the distracted drivers and potentially bike injuries. And I don't know, hopefully we're gathering some of that data with, in terms of right turns and cell phones when there are crashes.
I will note cell phone data is hard to, or distracted driving data, and is difficult to gather unless somebody admits it or they're seen. Mm-hmm. It is a challenge. It's likely higher than we know, reported wise, whether it's here locally or statewide or nationally. But I know that's, and certainly I think something we visually see a lot of people doing a lot of things besides driving. So, yeah.
Commissioner Lanier?
Yes. I think it was the slide before this one, if you could go back. So various types of bike highways or bikeways. So I'm curious to know, I was hoping that this plan would outline the plan to have bike highways or bikeways across the city. And I know, Eric, you and I have been talking about this a few times, and I've been pushing this, and you indicated that a plan would be coming forward, identifying ways in which people can travel by bike across the city. Because what we're finding and experiencing is that for safety purposes, a lot of bikers are on sidewalks, and then that causes problems for pedestrians, or even bikers behaving like pedestrians, and then you have accidents and things of that nature. So it's kind of hard to teach safety practices when people aren't necessarily following the rules that they're supposed to follow. And so when will that come? When will we have a comprehensive plan about where it's best to have bikeways?
Well, this plan, according to the schedule that Kristin has outlined, is what will develop that and bring that forward to you for your consideration. So Kristin will be going out and working with the community to try to identify the areas where those should be. And that's actually why I asked her to bring these, so you can see that the work is kind of ongoing and that it's being developed. So the intent is to develop that and to bring it forward for adoption. And then we will begin to program those for construction.
So it's a community's decision about where the bikeways should be versus the structure of a city and traffic and things of that nature?
We have our ideas.
Okay.
Based on the Vital Streets Plan and based on the mode analysis that came out of the Vital Streets Plan. But there's also, we do engagement as well to find out information and try to determine the best place to make that investment.
So vetting those ideas with the community to get their feedback. I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I am going to bring this to a close, and I'll just make a final comment. Kristin, I want to say thanks to you also for your work on this. I feel like we've been talking about this around this table for probably 2 years, and probably Commissioner Lanier has been the most vocal, saying we need a plan so we know where to make investments. And so thank you for your work on this. And then my last comment is I was able to attend some of the meetings related to Age-Friendly City and get feedback. And one of the topics that we talk about during that process, not we, I didn't facilitate, I sat in, was transportation. And several of the folks that I talked to talked about how as they get older and they don't have a vehicle, they use a bike more, and how they want the city to feel safer, that they don't always feel safe. So I think that continues to be a message that we're all hearing from a number of populations in the city. So thank you for making that front and center.
We tabled at a few of the age-friendly communities, and then I've been in contact with Jenny to say, I want your transportation focus group feedback. So
Great.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right, Commissioners, I'm going to move us along because I really want to get through this agenda and get us into executive session and to public safety on time. So next is the presentation on Vision Zero.
Tom's going to help me. Where is it?
This is why we pay Tom. Yes, extra value.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. This is about the Vision Zero was mentioned. We've been focusing around safety, as you know, both with driving change and then the recent Office of Highway Safety grant for pedestrians. And our goal when we do any of this work is to improve street safety and quality of life in all of our neighborhoods and build awareness about dangerous moving violations like failing to yield or stop to pedestrians, new street designs and configurations to improve safety, broad public outreach and communications, and then make legislative changes where necessary. And as we've been doing this work, you may recall last year we amended the rules, 2 years ago now, before we did the Driving Change campaign, we amended rules to make sure that we were had the most up-to-date requirements and what our goals were. In December, you adopted the Vital Streets Plan, and there were a number of measures of success that were identified, but the first of those was traffic-related serious injuries and fatalities and reducing those, which is the Vision Zero, and the basis of that. And so we have been measuring those crashes involving pedestrians, involving cyclists, doing that messaging, and really taking that very seriously. And in the values of the Vital Streets Plan, we identified 6 core values with our working groups from the Vital Streets work. Mode share and shifting mode share was one of those. Equity, Vision Zero, eliminating all traffic-related serious injuries and fatalities on Grand Rapids City streets. Health, age-friendly, and climate change were also identified. But the idea of Vision Zero, and so this work that I'm presenting to you today really carries that Vision Zero piece forward and starts to expand on that. As you can tell, the topic of transportation is massive, and there's all these different components in working together, and how do we put these things together? So when we talk about Vision Zero, we talk about traffic crashes that are not mere accidents. So it's not a traffic accident. These things can be prevented and can be systematically addressed. In the 1990s in Sweden, it's when it was first started and has really spread around the country. In major cities, we're seeing it being adopted all over, and MDOT has also adopted, it's not Vision Zero, they call it Zero Deaths, but they have other work that they've been advancing. And so when we look at Vision Zero, we look at the data and the methodology. We use that education, enforcement, engineering that Kristin had mentioned for bikes. We also look at kind of the severity of those crashes and what that means. When you talk about someone who's injured and the severity of that injury, that can significantly impact someone's quality of life, their earning ability, their families, and so that severity of the crash is also very, very important. Coming out of the Vital Streets Plan adoption in December, we just finished this fall our Vital Streets Design Guidelines. This is a staff working document, so it's not something that was approved by the City Commission, but the Vital Streets Design Guide really sets the parameters for city staff when we're designing facilities on what we need to be thinking about. So there's 2 key principles that we have in the Design Guidelines. It's a nice thick book, but all streets should be safe and accessible for all users, and streets should be logical and intuitive to use. So we we are guiding people through design on how they should behave and how that interaction happens on the street so that people know intuitively where they're supposed to be. We're trying to avoid confusion and just make it as simple as it can, which provides that safety. There's several design choices when we're looking at how we design our streets. We look at the vehicle design speed, the design vehicle and control vehicle, operational performance measures, the peak period and forecast year, kind of what are the trends for the facility, and then the all users in their experiences. So when we developed the design guide, it was with these metrics in mind, and in particular speed. When we talk about speed, the odds of a pedestrian being killed or a cyclist being killed increases significantly the faster the automobile goes. So you have a 12% of pedestrian fatality if they're traveling 25 miles per hour. That goes up to almost 50%, so 45% chance of pedestrian fatality at 40 miles per hour. If you look at former engineering standards and how conventional street design has been, those bubbles on the top, the conventional street design line, we might post it for 25 miles per hour. Well, engineering will say, well, then the design speed is actually 5 miles over that, so we design it at 30 miles per hour. But the actual reality when people are out there driving is that they're usually going faster than the 30 miles per hour. And so we might see them going 40 miles per hour. Versus when we do context-sensitive design, and the design approach that we're intending to do for all of our streets, and we have been doing actually, when you look at some of the new designs we have for Vital Streets, we're trying to take all of that, both the design speed, the posted speed, and what that actual driver will be driving, and take that to 25 miles per hour. And so that does cause a little bit of angst. We've had a lot of discussions about Burton Street, where we did the road diet, but we lessened the speed from the average speed from almost 40 miles per hour down to, well, it was 39 miles per hour down to 25. So we've reduced the speed on there. We've reduced the number of speeding tickets by 90% along that street. And the percent of severe and fatal crashes, we didn't have any fatal crashes, so severe crashes was down by 2/3. So we can do this. There's a number of policy recommendations that we're making, both for resolutions, policies, and ordinances that I'm presenting. So you have a table that's in front of you. The first one is that we adopt a Vision Zero resolution, very similar to the Complete Streets resolution that we adopted a number of years ago. It really sets the framework for city staff in guiding this work and kind of makes that kind of the statement that we need to construct all these policies around it. So it would demonstrate that commitment and really focus on the safety of all users on the streets. And it also complements the work that we've been doing with Driving Change and the Office of Highway Safety Planning for our education and enforcement efforts to improve the safety for pedestrians and bicyclists on our streets. So the first piece is that resolution that really serves as the umbrella for all of these other resolutions. The second piece would be amending Chapter 51 of Streets, similar to what you did with no parking in a bike lane a couple of years ago. We don't have anything that says no parking in a transit stop. So it's pretty easy. So this one is, I think, an easy one, but it will affect parking spaces, and we have to go through that analysis about how many parking spaces. But as we're looking at the transit stops in association with the transit shelter program that Kristin's working on, we have to kind of rethink all this anyway. So we were making that recommendation. The third recommendation would be to look at development projects using right-of-way that are blocking pedestrian and bicycle access. We've heard a lot of recent complaints, and I think part of that is because of the amount of construction activity that we have going on in downtown and the neighborhoods, and the size of these projects. We don't have little tiny projects anymore. We're having owned private development projects now building their own parking ramps to support their project. That's new. We're seeing larger blocks being developed. And so that has come with a lot of concern as we have more people biking and walking in the community about these obstructions and safety and being forced to cross the street. So I've got a couple examples of where we've heard this and a couple issues that are arising from it. So this is 50 Monroe, where because they're taking off the face of that building, it's all. But when we run into Art Prize and how do you get people to cross, we did some flexible delineators in the street and had people cross and had a police officer stationed location there, but how do we make sure that there's regular clearance? And on the right, you can see a gentleman actually walking in the street. This is the Embassy Suites project in North Monroe. Both the bike lane and the sidewalk are completely taken out, and so there's a detour that is, that's supposed to be posted, but we don't really see that in this picture. This is the Warner Tower that's at Pearl and Ottawa. And in some cases, the right-of-way is being used for parking, it's being used for other things and not for pedestrian clearance, or we need to figure out how to fit those in. We hear oftentimes in bigger cities they figured it out, like Chicago and New York. We can do it too. So we want to amend the ordinance to allow this, to make sure that we're very clear and change the default so that it will be provided unless there's other extenuating circumstances where we can't provide that access. The fourth recommendation is improved temporary occupancy permit enforcement abilities. Right now, we do not have in the omnibus fee schedule thing for ticketing for violations. So when John Hayes goes out, or LUDS inspectors, when they go out and they're inspecting a site, they might see dumpsters. This is an example in the street, but we have other examples of dumpsters in rights-of-way and across sidewalks and other locations where we need a better way to kind of do enforcement, and so that's always part of the activities that we look to. The fifth regulation change that we'd be recommending to you is changing yield to stop. So both Traverse City and Ann Arbor have stop rules for pedestrians when pedestrian is in or entering into the crosswalk. So rather than yield, which is more permissive, they encourage people to stop fully if someone is in the crosswalk so that they can go through. So we have that ordinance recommendation. And finally, trying to measure safety with the amenities that the community wants and the aesthetics that the community wants. So we've had a lot of discussions about increasing awareness that people live here, having some of the sensitivity regarding placemaking that the neighborhoods want. We've heard a lot of different things. And so this last recommendation is kind of broken into three parts regarding art in local streets. The City Commission Arts Advisory Committee has a policy about things in our public areas and how we view that. We want to combine that with some other changes, but these are policy changes. And so when we looked at that, we reviewed both the Michigan Uniform Traffic Control Device standards as well as federal guidance, and we worked with the Attorney's Office on what would be feasible and allowable within that area, taking into consideration that guidance and those requirements, as well as the types of streets that we're talking about. So this first recommendation would allow decorative painting on local streets. So when we talk about local streets, that's about 2/3, 3/4 of our streets. So these are not major streets where we use state or federal funds for to improve those streets. These are local neighborhood streets with an average daily traffic below 4,000 cars a day. And the federal guidance does allow for street art and intersection murals. So you could do art in travel lanes and medians, but the goal is to not have them interfere with any traffic control devices. A crosswalk is a traffic control device, and so we want to avoid the crosswalk, but there are examples where this has been done really well, and you can see where they're outside of the crosswalk area, but they still can do the art in the streets, in the intersections. Again, to raise awareness, and there's some assertion that it helps, do traffic calming, but certainly from a placemaking standpoint, there's no data that we have that says, this slows down cars from a safety perspective. But we do recognize that there's aesthetic and kind of community considerations that people want to see this type of improvement in their neighborhood. So we want to figure out ways to allow it. So the first one would be looking at these intersections and medians, this dead space that we might have in city streets where it's not interfering with those traffic control devices to allow that type of activity. The second recommendation would address the crosswalk painting or crosswalk enhancements. We found examples that both comply with MUTCD language and federal highway guidance. The language, though, is not kind of everything everywhere. I pulled the most kind of, I think, salient piece from the language from the federal guidance. Subdued colored aesthetic treatments between the legally marked transverse crosswalk lines are permissible. Elements, pattern, and color for these treatments are to be uniform, consistent, repetitive, and expected so as not to be a source of distraction. No element of aesthetic interior treatment can implement pictographs, symbols, multiple color arrangements, etc., or can otherwise attempt to communicate to any roadway user. And they go on to describe colors and some different things, but there are treatments like this one in Traverse City where they took the subdued colors, they did some patterning, they did something different than would be a normal, traditional, just white crosswalk. We have piano keys that has that uniformity and consistency in color that would also be allowed. That was done in Kalamazoo. The picture on the left, if you go to Indianapolis and you see the cultural trail, they've used this patterning with the consistency, and then you have the blocks as designs. So there are some creative approaches, but also still fall within that federal guidance and the MUTC guidelines. So that consistency, the expectations, without going too far outside of those boundaries is something that we could consider from a policy standpoint. And then finally, and here's the example that Crystal worked with Williams and works with Lene Wells on. Again, this was a demonstration project, but looking again that consistency and pattern with the waves and color were something that was taken into consideration as they were identifying this as a potential pilot. The final one is looking at how to respond to other facilities within the public right-of-way, including sidewalks, sign cabinets, and light poles. Again, can't appear to be a traffic control device, but looking at other types of painting in the right-of-way where it's allowed. And examples, there's these really cool examples that are out there of rain markings. So there's a marking on a sidewalk, but you don't see it until it gets wet. So there's some innovative things that are out there. This is from Ann Arbor. This guy goes around and paints little things on sidewalks. But then you also have decorative cabinets. The one on the left is from Detroit when they were having the Transformers movie. But then you also have different painting, and of course we've got Reb's artwork all over. So that type of thing, we don't have a formal policy right now addressing it. It's been pretty permissive, but we do want to recognize, especially with working with the Arts Advisory Committee, that there is a place for art, but that work, we also have to recognize there's potential pitfalls regarding maintenance and messaging and what those things are. So we want to make sure that's a little bit more formalized in our approach. The timeline for this, we're talking about this today. If you are amenable to these recommendations, then we would bring it forward to you both to adopt the Vision Zero resolution, to modify the city policies, which could be done without a hearing, or if you want a hearing for that, we could also do that. It'd be a first reading for the ordinances and then to set the hearing. We would have a public hearing on the 28th of November, and then on the December 12th, we could adopt the ordinances. Again, it's up to the commission as to whether or not you'd want a public hearing, but anticipating that you might, I worked that into the timeline.
Great, thank you. All right, questions, commissioners?
Yeah, thank you for this. I really like the format. It's easy to read, very simple. You talked about local streets being less than 4,000 a year, cars per day, excuse me. So the decorative treatment in crosswalks has been probably the thing I've heard most about. So I would recommend a public hearing and to make sure that we get out to the neighborhoods what those policies will look like so that they can make comments. Sure. Because, I think about streets like Alger in the 3rd Ward, Leonard, in these business corridors, the CID areas, and Plainfield's one in the 2nd Ward, trying to figure out how to manage traffic in those areas. I know they're not local streets with small numbers, they're very large numbers, and yet there are real safety concerns in sections of those that are within the very busy business districts. So just to better understand what this policy might mean and get some feedback would be helpful. And also what what the state says we can and cannot do, and if those are written in stone. What can we do locally? I know Ann Arbor's got an ordinance that moved away from some of the state guidelines, so what can we do? locally?
I think it's what you're comfortable with, and certainly the city attorney has weighed in on that and regarding the federal guidance. So we can certainly provide the federal guidance to you for review, just so you're familiar with that, and we may need additional weighing in from Anita.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
I asked the same question, Commissioner, and we see them all over in other cities, and I know there's issues that have been brought up about the federal guidelines and liability. So I'm really curious, about other cities, and quite frankly, if any city has ever been sued for doing something creative in their crosswalks. So I think having a little bit more time to look into that, I think, is a good idea. But from this body, it sounds like we need a little bit of direction to determine if we want to go with this proposed timeline. Sounds like Commissioner Kelly would like a public hearing. I'm supportive of that. Is everyone supportive in giving the green light to move forward with bringing back some of these resolutions to the full commission?
Yes.
Yes, okay. My only other question, and I think this is probably maybe more for Greg, so having just had the bicycle presentation done by Kristin and then this one, I'm curious about just having this be led by the planning department instead of the mobility department, especially now with the restructuring of our mobile GR committee. It seems like it's a better fit with the mobility department. But I'm just curious, structure-wise, have there been conversations about that?
You can be sure that Josh has been involved in both of these processes.
Okay. I mean, Commissioner, you serve on that. It just seems.
Well, there's a definite overlap here. So, but I know you meet together in design committee, but I think to have both present in answering questions and involved in this would be very helpful, because yes, there's so much overlap, and mobile GR has taken on these other modes of transportation and advancing them that clearly have impact with these revisions. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at like issues around transit and parking spaces and bike lanes, and it just seems like.
If I could add a little perspective.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'd be glad to. So these recommendations come to you from the combined design team, which includes Mobile GR, Chris Saul, Rick DeVries, Suzanne Schultz, Kristin Bennett, and they've also been reviewed by the Vital Streets Oversight Commission. So it's the same family, essentially, that brought you Sustainable Streets, it brought you Vital Streets, and brought you the bicycle progress that we've made so far. So while Suzanne is the messenger today, there was a team process. She was basically nominated to be messenger because people were elsewhere. So this is about the team approach to getting this done and making sure that we have a comprehensive recommendation. So everybody was included and had a role in making these recommendations and getting to this point.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Good to know.
just one more thing. I think that's great to have that team process, because you're all, impacting this. But I have had some conversations with Josh too and others about the process itself. And I know just as commissioners, we hear from neighborhood groups about these things, and sometimes they don't know, how do you funnel this through? So can we improve that process itself that, I'm sure you all want to do and are probably thinking about as well. So if that can be part of this conversation, so that there's like kind of a one door and a step-by-step process that simplifies it for the neighborhoods and the corridor improvement districts, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So the process we followed is first figuring out exactly what we can do and getting consensus on that. And then once we know that, then of course we'll have a very clear and transparent process for getting it done.
Okay.
If people want to do it. So good point.
Thanks. That's an excellent point. I think it is confusing.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Okay, Commissioners, we're going to move on, and I'm going to try to get us quickly through some of these. Our next is a resolution authorizing the formation of a nonprofit entity called Uptown Grand Rapids.
So moved.
Support.
All right, and Jessica's here to talk to us about this. I know that we have talked about this at length. Commissioner Jones serves on Uptown and has been actively involved in these conversations. I know we have a couple folks from Uptown here today, but I'll turn it to Jessica.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oops, am I pressing something? Okay. You have before you a resolution which would authorize the city's law department to form a nonprofit entity entitled Uptown Grand Rapids to serve the Uptown CID and BID district areas, which are coterminous. The reason for this request is that SIDS and BIDS cannot, pursuant to law, go out and form their own nonprofits, but home rule cities can form nonprofits in order to help implement things that they want to implement. Both the Uptown CID and BID have grown tremendously in size and scope over the past few years, and the Uptown area is home to a number of neighborhood associations and business associations. As you can see in this memo, just within that district, there's not only the CID and the BID, there's Midtown Neighborhood Association, East Hills Council of Neighbors, Easttown Community Association, Baxter Neighborhood Association, Fulton Heights, East Fulton Business Association, East Hills, so at Wealthy Street, Easttown Business, and the city, of course. And so with all these overlapping groups, we believe that the nonprofit could be used to help collaborate and make sure everybody's on the same page and that working together to do things efficiently. So what we're asking for today is that you authorize us to go ahead and form a Michigan nonprofit for them to do that. And then also to prepare the related documents such as the articles of incorporation and the bylaws, et cetera. So any questions about this? It's kind of a test case for the SIDS and BIDS. If this works out, potentially the other SIDS and BIDS might want the same thing.
Pilot as opposed to test.
Yeah. Government can experiment and test. You're absolutely right. I mean, I feel like with Uptown being one of the very first SIDS in the city, the other SIDS and BIDS have learned from some of the work, and this is another example potentially of that. Commissioner Jones, any thoughts?
Oh, actually, if you don't mind, I'll defer to City Manager. He's been very hands-on, and I'll have some comments as well. So,
there's been several conversations about this. I think Jessica has led this to a good place, and so the next thing you have to do is authorize us to get started, and that will further call for probably some additional negotiation over the concepts as we move forward and things like the bylaws. But this is on a right track. This is going to set really, I think, the future for potentially all the BIDS and SIDS and maybe even neighborhood associations and business associations to combine together to reduce overhead costs, basically. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to the DGRI model that has served downtown very well.
All right. Great. All right, I'll call the question. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. And Jessica, Greg, thank you both for your work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And you. All right, next, that will take us to a resolution authorizing the assistant to the city manager to approve contracts and authorize disbursements from funds budgeted in support of the SAFE report.
So moved.
Support. All right, Asante, you want to tell us about this?
Good morning. So you allocated funds in support of the SAFE Task Force and their recommendations. There's about 25 or so recommendations that were attached that really are the focus of the city's work, and we're looking to find ways to partner and highlight and work with community organizations and individuals that help with those recommendations. And so if you can imagine maybe a pitch night, this is an opportunity for us to give a little push to those different organizations that might need a little help, all in the same focus of completing the work of the SAFE Task Force, finding opportunities to reduce violence in our community, and this is a novel way, a new way to do that. It's matched up a little bit on what you guys did with the Neighborhood Match Fund. It's very limited. I don't want all your authority. I just want it 6 times, 3 times for individuals for grants of we would enter into a partnership of $500 for individuals and $5,000 for 3 501c3s. And just looking forward to trying to do things in a different way. So this is what we have forward for your consideration today.
Great. So I will turn to our colleagues who serve on SAFE. See if you have any comments or want to add anything.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. We the commission approved the funding for the allocation for the Safe Task Force, and we met, and we came up with a few different ideas of ways in which we can spend the funding, and this was one of the creative ways that we're hoping will kind of spark the interest in the community to let them know there are ways for them to creatively reduce violence, and they can look at the recommendations that we currently have, or they can come up with something on their own and say, they'll pitch it and then someone will judge. Ruth is considering getting in pitching herself.
Is that a
so she won't be
conflict? I think that's a conflict.
Conflict, yes. But I do have a great idea.
You could be a judge.
That's right. And it should be a fun night, and it'll happen in November.
Early December.
Or early December, so.
Okay, great. And as soon as that date is identified, you'll let us know.
Absolutely.
So that if we are able to attend, we can
Yes.
add that to our schedule. All right? Okay. Maybe you can get somebody else to take your idea.
Then I can't be a judge.
Right. That's true. All right. Any other questions or comments, commissioners? It's good to see some recommendations coming forward. I know we talked about this at length in the spring, and we want to make sure that we are working hard to implement those recommendations. So. All right. Oh, Greg?
Mayor, I would just like to publicly commend Asante for grabbing a hold of this entire SAFE project and really doing an amazing job.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving 2 novation agreements between city, the county, Kent County, and Asset. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support. All right, and I'll turn to our city manager for this. This is ongoing work that we've been doing as we've worked together to create this partnership.
I seem to be drawn to projects that require negotiations with outside agencies. At any rate, earlier this year, the City Commission approved an agreement with Kent County designating the county as the community action agency, replacing the long-term community action agency of Asset. To continue or to complete that process, we also need to substitute Kent County for Asset on 2 other agreements, the General Operating Support Contract and the Individual Circuit Breaker Contract. There is a legal mechanism to do this with one approval, and that is called a novation. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. At any rate, this approval of this resolution would permit the city to enter into 2 separate novation agreements with Kent County and Asset, whereby Kent County will be fully and completely defined as the community action agency for these services.
Commissioner Allen serves on Asset, as does Commissioner Lanier. Anything to add?
No, this was a complicated process to get this to happen. We happened to have an Asset board meeting yesterday and heard kind of where it's at. And as usual, a lot of good, but also a lot of struggles, but we're working through it. And at the end of the day, it's a good decision and it will produce, I think, better results.
All right. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, and next, this is a resolution accepting a supplemental grant award and approving an agreement with the Department of Justice for the Grand Rapids Seeking Safety Modification Project, another project that's related to our SAFE recommendations.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Connie Bohatch. I know, so we're familiar with this project, but I'll let you add anything you would like.
Yes, so this is additional funding from the Department of Justice through the Office for Victims of Crime, known as OVC. And we were one of 12 projects nationally that initially received funding in late 2015 for their Supporting Male Survivors of Violence demonstration grant program. So this provides $660,000 additional dollars and extends that grant performance through September 30th of 2020. Our local project took an evidence-based trauma-informed best practice called Seeking Safety, which was a program originally developed for females and often used in situations for females who had experienced domestic violence. And although it was appropriate for men, not very many men participated. And our lead agency, the Family Outreach Center, worked with us and Dr. Venice Chandler is here, right behind me. She's hiding. And she's the executive director of the Family Outreach Center, and they are the lead agency to do the implementation of the project. But they worked very hard to modify that particular group counseling model to be developmentally and culturally appropriate for African American males ages 14 to 24. So that's in essence our demonstration. We piloted that in the first phase of the project, which was the first year, and we're now in implementation. Things are going really well, and if you have any questions specifically about the program or who's being served and how that's being done, Dr. Chandler is more than happy to answer all that. But we're really excited to have this extended again through 2020 to be able to serve more people and keep refining the work because it is a demonstration project. So that's part of it, to learn and keep improving.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. We are really excited to receive this funding and have this program extended. FOC, they provide incredible services in our community. Venice, it's good to see you. I don't know if everyone knows, but Venice is being honored this year as a Tribute Award winner, so congratulations again. Well deserved. I'll just add a plug for Seeking Safety. It truly is an evidence-based practice, and I'm glad to see it extend to other populations. This program, if you're not familiar with it, it's incredible. The data is compelling. It's incredibly effective. And so we're glad to see that this is going to continue. So thank you. I'll turn to my colleagues for any questions or comments.
I'll just make a brief one. Thank you to Connie for all of your work. She was kind of roped into this. And she has, literally, and she has taken it on. She is fully aware of probably things she had no idea that she was going to learn through this process. And FOC, Dr. V and her staff, they've been amazing to work with. And it's been great because not only do we believe that the impact that is being made on the participants will have positive impact on their lives, but we also believe that they too will then impact other lives because of what they're learning through this work. So thank you to both of you for your hard work and spending time and making sure that this has been a success. And I'm hopeful that when it's time for this grant phase to end, that there will be more dollars to spend because we know that there's yet more work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commission. It's been a long time since I've been here, but it's good to see you all. Many friends and colleagues sit before me today. And it's certainly been our pleasure at Family Outreach Center to provide this important service in the community. We're excited about what it is that we're doing so far. We've been able to serve at least 171 young men as it relates to providing at least one service. Most times it's multiple services. We've offered 11 12-week groups so far where 58 young men have actually completed the group process. We have loads of community partners and support, and we're just looking forward to the future. And one of the most notable things that has happened that we're really excited about is the fact that we were successful in our negotiations with the DOJ to get them to lower the age group. When we initially started in November of 2015, the age range was 16 to 24. Important age group, certainly need a lot of services. But those of us that know prevention work, the earlier you can get started, the greater likelihood that any change will be sustained. And so we're just thrilled to be able to work with 14 to 24-year-olds. So thank you again for your support, and we'll be back to tell you how we're doing in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. I know, I feel like we should clap.
Yes,
I know.
it is. Yes. Congratulations. And thank you.
Congratulations. Two exciting announcements today, that being one of them. So I'll call the question on that, and it'll take us to our next one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution accepting grant awards from the Seal Case Foundation and the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. I see Lori in the audience. Thank you for being here. For the eviction prevention program in the 61st District Court. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right. So, Connie, you want to tell us about this? I see Ruth has her book, Evicted, by Matthew Desmond, on her table. I think many of us, if not all of us, have read that book. But you want to?
Yeah, I should probably let Commissioner Kelly tell the story. But this is really exciting. Probably one of the most difficult projects I've had to work on in a while. We've got our team members here, great partners for this project. Of course, Lori Kraft is here from the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. Julie Reidenauer from the Steelcase Foundation sends her apologies, but our project team, Gary Secor and Tanya Todd from the 61st District Court, James Geeson from the Department of Health and Human Services, and Christina Soulard from the Salvation Army. They were a great team that worked really hard over several months to put together and develop an eviction prevention program that will be implemented in the 61st District Court. In essence, what that will do is help tenants who are being served for non-payment of rent to be able to more quickly access state emergency relief funds that they may be eligible for and other financial resources that they may be eligible for. And it really is a win-win situation for the tenant and for the landlord, because in the end, the landlord really just wants to be paid in most cases, and the tenant often just wants to stay. So if they're eligible for these resources, it allows us to have pre-court and on-site court assistance prior to those proceedings occurring. We are really excited to have the partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services, because this will allow us to have a dedicated staff person who will just work on these types of cases. And what we've learned from other courts, this is being done in this 62B District Court, Judge Kelly's court, as well as in Kalamazoo and a few others throughout our state. And what we're learning is that having that dedicated staff who really works through the situations and the issues that the family may have to determine how to best provide that assistance. This is intended to be one-time assistance, so it's not there to be, a rent payment program for long-going. So households really need to have a sustainable source of income. The unit has to be affordable to them. So this really provides an opportunity for other services as well to figure out the situation for those families. And again, we thank the Grand Rapids Community Foundation and the Steelcase Foundation for stepping up, because it would not be possible if they did not provide support to pilot this project in the 61st District Court for a 3-year period. And part of that pilot is really about collecting data so that we can understand more of what's going on in our community regarding evictions and the prevention, and also the impact or the causes of why people get into those situations.
Great. So, Connie, just 2 questions. One, I know there's been a lot of conversations about data. Have we figured out a way to collect good, not just benchmark data, but also what data are we going to collect going forward to look at success or at least impact? And then my second question is, and this is highlighted in the book quite a bit, about how tenants really walk into the situation when they're being evicted with significant barriers, whether it's lack of representation, difficulty in getting to the court, when they're there not really having good guidance, decisions being made without really even understanding fully the predicament they're in or the struggles that they're having. So can you walk us through a little bit about how some of those barriers that we know exist for families will be addressed through this process?
Would it be okay to have the project partners come up and talk about that? Because they all have very specific roles. So why don't we have Gary, Christina, and James, who's back there, and perhaps they can give you briefly how that will work. Because we have the master of the court process and the docketing process, and then the agencies that will do the outreach and intake and processing of applications.
And data collection too.
And the data. And we actually have a whole series of data components that we've promised to our funding partners as well. And that's kind of divvied up between all the agencies in terms of where it makes most sense to be collected. And the grant award also allows us to hire an evaluator for this along the way. So we will be looking at that on an annual basis to make sure that in case we need to make adjustments.
Great. Thanks, Connie. Gary, welcome. Thank you for your work on this.
Commissioners. First off, I'd just like to say the 61st District Court is very excited to enter into this collaborative effort with the City of Grand Rapids. I guess I'm hitting that there. And Salvation Army and the Department of Health and Human Services. When Connie approached myself and I had her at a judges meeting in the spring, and she introduced this concept, all of the judges were very supportive and recommended that we move forward with this initiative. Connie's done an exceptional job of putting this together. I don't know if you're aware, we process over 4,000 landlord-tenant cases a year. Approximately 1,000 of those, or 25%, end up in evictions. So we're hoping to put a dent in that. I'd like to commend our clerk of the court, Tanya Todd. She's done an exceptional job in working out all the logistics with all the docketing and all the processes that will be involved at the court, and helping us work on the facilities and notification. As Connie said, this will be a pilot. We're starting this with 2 judges, Judges Faber and Judge Distel. They went along with Connie and Tanya down to Kalamazoo to look at their operations. We're aware what Judge Kelly is doing out in Kentwood. We're probably modeling something closer to what they're doing in Kalamazoo, the district court there. They have 2 district judges that do this for all their landlord-tenant. And it's a very collaborative effort there also. And they have a full-time DHS person assigned to the court to handle these. We fully intend after this pilot, and the judges are on board, to expand this to all 6 judges' dockets. So this is not anything that's going to be a pilot for 3 years. We anticipate a short-term pilot and then expanding it. We just need to work out the details and processes initially. Now, in response to you, Mayor Bliss, the process will work. Number 1, we will have an orientation scheduled in November with what we call all our high-volume landlords and our high-volume attorneys that represent landlords here in the city of Grand Rapids. And we will propose this concept and hopefully get them on board with us so we can identify up front those landlords that are willing to participate. We'll also do that with the Landlords Association here in Grand Rapids, so kind of the mom and pop places, so we can find out how many of them also want to be on board, so we can identify up front those that want to be involved. So we'll target those cases when they're docketed, either before Judge Faber or Judge Distel, or we'll target those cases to be scheduled in front of them. Those cases, when they're docketed, also, we will be sending a list over to the Salvation Army and Department of Health and Human Services prior to those cases even coming to court. So hopefully we can be proactive and they can do their thing in terms of determine eligibility for assistance for these individuals. And by way of doing that, once they come into court, we will have what we call an agreement between the landlord and the tenant that will be put on the record that will hold that eviction off. And as long as it's resolved within 14 days, then that case is dismissed. So you accomplish a couple of things here. Number 1, they don't have an eviction on a civil court record, which is detrimental to them when they want to go and try to rent again, number 1. Number 2, they'll be able to maintain their households and fortunately be less disruptive for families and the children and schools and everything else. So that, in a nutshell, is the process. In terms of legal representation, we looked at the possibilities of that, but it's fairly cut and dry in this circumstance in terms of how the process works and the agreement between the landlord and the tenant.
Great.
So if I can answer anything more on the court side or perspective, I'd be happy to, but I'll defer to the professionals at DHS and Salvation Army on how they work out the monetary end of those.
Great. Thank you, Gary.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, just real quickly, you don't have to go through all the details, but if you want to add anything.
You can come on up too. Hi, I'm Christina Soulard. I'm the Housing Services Director at the Salvation Army. We're really excited to be a partner within this pilot. I think that what we know is that not every eviction leads to homelessness, but we know that those who are homeless typically have something like that in the background that is impacting their ability to be able to move forward with housing stability. So we're excited to be a part of something that's at the front end of this need, and hopefully to be able to address it, and as Gary mentioned, keep that off the record for folks that are going through some challenges, and as a way to just enhance their stability and their independence.
Good morning, I'm James Geisen. I'm a section manager with the Department of Health and Human Services in Kent County, and we have had the smaller scale version in Kentwood is not a donated fund position, so we are very excited to have a dedicated worker on a much larger scale to be able to have a bigger impact. And with a dedicated worker, without this support, we would not be able to free up a caseworker. So it's hard when someone has 670 cases to dive into the details and to really make connections. So this person will not carry an ongoing caseload. They'll be 100% processing these cases. So we can make those connections. One of the data pieces that we talked about collecting also is tracking which schools, if they have children they're attending. We have our Pathways to Potentials workers located in schools throughout the county. So we're looking at stabilizing housing there too, which is very exciting to keep children in the same school systems.
Great. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Just a big, huge thank you. I know during our budget process, Gary, you mentioned you were paying attention to our conversations about an eviction court, so I appreciate your follow-up. And all of those who contributed to this, the foundations, DHSS, and Salvation Army. And Gary, I'd like to give you this to take back to the court. I had 2 copies of eviction. It's first time I read anything about it was in the New Yorker. It turned out to be a chapter from this book, and then many of us have read this. But in case anybody at the court would like to read it, it's a big book, but it's an interesting read because they're very human stories. So thank you so much for your work on it.
Thank you. I'll make this an assignment for my judges.
Assignment.
It's actually a worthwhile read. I think they should read it. Thank you. Commissioner Allen?
Definitely a great first start. I just want to make a quick comment. When we heard the number that Gary gave of the number of evictions that the court sees, I would point out the reality of that is only a percentage of those are for non-payment of rent. There's also for houses being sold. They have to evict them before it's sold, or it's for potentially they're raising the rent, so they've been paying up to time, but all of a sudden their lease is up, so they up the rent by $500. So there's lots of reasons why somebody might have to be evicted other than non-payment of rent. So this is one piece of it, but I think we have bigger issues to deal with as well. So I just want to always keep that before us.
Yeah, we thank you, Commissioner, for saying that, and we know it's not a silver bullet, but there's a lot of things that we can do better, and this is one of them. So
yep, it's a good start.
Yeah, thank you. All right, anything else, Commissioners? All right, Connie, thank you again for taking the lead on this, and I want to thank our funders for helping us and partnering with us on this initiative. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution authorizing a universal data shared agreement with Michigan State Police to establish a regional asset management pilot program.
So moved.
All right. Kerry, you want to tell us about this?
Well, all of this came about as a result of the Governor's 21st Century Infrastructure Task Force, which Eric was very involved in. And they pretty much figured out that we don't know where our assets are in Michigan. We're not really sure what level they're at, and that's water, stormwater, wastewater, transportation. Transportation is actually kind of in the lead because most of us have, like we've seen through Vital Streets, there are ratings to assess our street levels, and it's a little bit easier when you can drive with a camera and assess everything as opposed to having to go underground. So grants were awarded to both Southeast and West Michigan. We've been working with Grand Valley Metro Council to establish an asset management program, and just to get the very basics, I've been working since this spring with a group that basically decided, okay, we have everywhere from Ludington and even smaller communities to Grand Rapids and Detroit. What universally should most communities have for asset management? You know, what depth are your pipes? What are they made of? What's the construction date? From there, we can take either if you have ratings, like we have official National Association of Sanitary Sewer Company has a rating system that many communities use, but it's very complex and people need to be certified. For those who don't do that, we can just say, well, this is the type of pipe when it was installed. Here's what we expect the lifetime to be. To kind of take all that data, find out who has what and where we're at for expected remaining useful life on all these assets and put it together as a pilot for the state. As part of that, we're giving out data that we don't typically give out to the general public. We don't want always everybody to know every aspect of our drinking water system or even our wastewater system sometimes.
Think Homeland Security.
I'm sorry?
Think Homeland Security.
Explaining why that is. It's
Absolutely.
not that we are being secretive. It's just that we need to be mindful of safety and.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, and this is why it's.
Just want to clarify.
The agreement is actually with the Michigan State Police because they have so much security already embedded in their system. So every community and every consultant that houses a community's GIS data has to sign this agreement in order to participate in the program to make sure that everybody's data is universally protected.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, Commissioners, any questions about that? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, Commissioners, I'm going to try to finish this up here, and I'll make a recommendation for next steps because I want to honor public safety. So let's go to our next resolution. That is a resolution scheduling meetings of the City Commission in November and December. So Commissioners, these are meetings in addition to our standing committee meetings. These are our 3 meetings that we would like to schedule in preparation for, one is a general work session that will cover a number of topics. Some of you have already sent me some of the things that you would like covered in that work session. If you have additional items, please let me know as the city manager works on finalizing the schedule for the 28th. The other 2, November 21 and December 5, will be mid-year financial sustainability transformation outcomes and updates. And then December 5th will be a planning process that we will do collectively in preparation for next year's fiscal plan. And so that will be with a number of city staff and all of us. We'll have facilitators coming in to help with that. But hopefully that will provide us an opportunity to provide some consensus about recommendations as the budget for next year is being prepared and before it's finalized and comes to us in March or April. So any questions about that? I think all of you were sent hold dates on your Outlook calendars. I'm pretty sure we have the locations finalized, but those should also be on your Outlook, and those will be posted with this notice as well. All right, any questions or comments about that? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, Commissioners, and then our last resolution before us today is a resolution to adopt our schedule for next year. So these are the 2 times a month that we meet for all of our meetings, our full day, our full Tuesdays. And can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support. All right, and Commissioners, I have asked our city attorney our clerk to bring forward schedules. I think I emailed all of you. The original packet, my oversight, I didn't realize had a schedule that I had asked for revisions in. So a number of revisions and amendments to our schedule had already been made to honor election days and budget days. I asked for a few additional ones for conflicts I have. So attached is, I think I sent you the dates, but here's the final one. I would like to make an amendment to adopt the revised budget that incorporates a few additional changes for next year. I talked to our city attorney about that, and I know that there were some questions about posting. I think they have that.
So, Mayor, so the 0, the O is the original and the R is for the revised.
Is the revised, yes.
Okay.
So I would like, and the original was what was in the packet that was posted, and I apologize for not catching that sooner and putting in the revised one. And so the revised one is what I would like to consider today to incorporate for our schedule for next year.
So mine's look identical.
Yeah, March is different.
Oh,
Yeah,
March
it's just
is
March.
different.
Yeah, there's just a couple.
Okay, so I do have a question. So help me to understand, Madam City Clerk. I remember you mentioning something about the posting piece of it and publishing this, and even making sure that you have the time to post-meeting take care of things. And was that the concern that we were having, that if we were to have too many back-to-back meetings that it would cause a concern?
Correct. It would. Well, having back-to-back meetings within itself is very challenging to manage because when we are actually preparing for one meeting, we're wrapping another meeting up, and then we're preparing for another, which creates a very huge challenge for the stress, not only for the staff, but the publication requirements. So depending on what you guys approve, there could be publication challenges. And right now we are having deadlines being pushed back and publication dates being pushed back currently, and we're really trying to manage that, but it is very difficult. My main concern is statutory requirements, and we do have legality issues that must be taken into consideration. So if we're able to build in capacity for that, that would be my recommendation. Other than that, we may be facing issues, potentially legal issues. So I did consult with the city attorney and actually 2 members on the city attorney staff to help me to develop their best recommendations, and what you see before you is the outcome of that.
And that's the original, the one that was published.
Original.
And then, Mary, you had, were these conferences or something that you have on your calendar?
Yeah,
And you're
they're-
trying to work around those?
Yeah, there are
Okay.
conflicts that I already know about. And,
Okay.
I followed up on the city attorney or city clerk's concern about legality, because of course we want to be within the parameters of the law. And I do realize it's a little more work, but the city attorney assured me that there's no legal concerns we have with the revised schedule. And city attorney, do you want to speak to that?
I can, because there's two issues. One is, of course, that the commission has by ordinance, has the authority to, by resolution, to adopt the schedule as it satisfies them. The other issue that Darlene raises is publication, and depending what's on the agenda, the dates they vary depending what the subject is. And so we can't just clearly say, okay, you need 7 days for everything, or you need 10 days. It's various. Actually, I didn't realize till Darlene asked us that it's complex. And so we're going to try to develop timelines for them on what they need for these different items. It's going to take some time. We couldn't do that for today, but we're going to work on that. So we can't concretely say she needs 7 days, she needs 10 days. It's going to vary. And so I believe the change involves 5 days out of the 24 days. So the only way that could work without violation is for us to look ahead what's on the agenda for those 5 days. And anything that would put us in violation, then we have to move those to a different date. So bottom line is, we could do it if you really want to do it, but you might have to adjust some of the things that are on the agenda for those 5 days.
So the the restriction would then come for staff in what it is that they'll be able to have on the agenda based on the timing. Is
Correct, because in working with MLive, I guess there's been some changes there by them moving out of state, from what I understand. So we would just have to be more attentive to planning ahead on those 5 days. So it's either going to be we follow the every other week, or we say in those exceptional circumstances that we look ahead and plan for those things that are going to put us in violation.
And that's one part of the other part for us is the overlap. So when we do have back-to-back meetings, it's very challenging for the staff to prepare for one meeting and wrap the other meeting up. So that's also something that should be taken into consideration.
Well, if I can just weigh in just briefly, so I think we had some conversations around elections, spring breaks, and Labor Day holiday, the beginning of school, and budget and all of that.
Fourth holiday.
So it looks like those things were taken into consideration, and those themselves will provide kind of a crunch for the clerk's office.
That is correct.
So it's really just the original schedule takes that into consideration. So we're really just talking about the one date in March and the one date in September. Those are the ones that I'm seeing as differences.
Only 3 of them are related to me.
Okay.
The January, the March, and the September. The other ones were for other reasons.
Right,
Like
okay, yeah,
spring break,
exactly, like all of those
holidays,
other things,
elections,
right. That is
other
correct.
reasons.
Right.
There's 2 days rather than.
Yeah. Yes. So commissioners, thoughts on this? I mean, this is our meeting schedule, and I know we have to make adjustments. And hopefully the whole thing with publication, whether my understanding is we had made some progress with MLive, but also with all the work we're doing around communication, I anticipate even with our website and the communication audit and plan that we're coming up with internally, that we'll be able to get notice out quite a bit more effectively in the year to come.
And those will satisfy, we think if we publish it on our website, that will satisfy the law?
We'll still
No,
have
I'm
to
just
publish
saying
it.
no.
We'll still have to publish it in
Okay.
newspaper unless state law changes, which there has been talk about doing that over the last couple
Because
of
we're in a
years.
different time, and so publishing it in a printed paper isn't as efficient.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have one question. You know, this kind of reminds me of a conversation we had this morning in CD. Would this potentially hold up? I mean, we don't want to be holding up projects that have to come before us for planning commission. You know, they come to the planning commission, then they come and have a public hearing. But, you know, have we talked about taking that into consideration as well?
And I think that's
We
what
have to be
Anita
more
was.
strategic in our planning.
Okay.
When they go on the agenda.
Well, and commissioners, my hope also, and this isn't on this schedule because I need to look at everybody's schedule, I anticipate next year we'll also have more regular work sessions where we'll all be together. So if there is something similar to like we've had in the past with a liquor license or something like that, or a permit for something, if we have regular monthly scheduled work sessions, we can always, all of those will be posted too once we get those on our schedules. We can always walk something on. That's not the intent of the work session, but we will have an opportunity for that next year as well.
Well, I'm supportive of either calendar. I think, you know, as I'm hearing this, the clerk, I'm not sure how the work happens in the clerk's office, but I'm trying to be respectful of that. So I'm more inclined to do the original because it takes into consideration both things. The need for us to adjust some of those dates with the need of trying to accommodate staff, not just the clerk's office, but I think other staff who will publish. But, you know, I'm just as flexible with going with the other one too, but I think what we'll probably need to do is look closely to see, because I know that there's one in particular, a date that I wouldn't be able to make for personal work reasons, but I'm not going to ask for the calendar to be adjusted for that because I just recognize this is just one conflict that I may personally have and wouldn't want to subject the rest of the commission to that. But so that's just my 2 cents if that's what we're asking for.
All right, commissioners, other thoughts? So we can move on this and get to public safety, which I know we're running a few minutes behind for, and then I want to talk about executive session. Commissioners, any other recommendations? So the motion, can I get a motion either for the original or the revised?
There is a motion on the floor right now for the
revised.
Yeah.
Okay. So any other feedback on that? All right. All those in favor of the revised?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it carries. Thank you all, and we'll work with the city attorney and clerk's office. Okay, last thing, commissioners, we have public safety, and we're running a few minutes behind. That's down in 601. I know we have community members here for that meeting. So what I would like to recommend, if you all are available, public safety goes till noon, and then we have legislative at 12:30. Can we meet in executive session at noon in the attorney's office? It shouldn't be more than really probably 20 minutes. So maybe from noon, plan from noon to 12:30, executive session in the attorney's office. Does that work for everybody? Okay, so can I get a motion to go in executive session at noon after public safety?
So moved.
Okay, voice call. Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Kelly? Lanier?
Yes.
O'Connor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I will, I'll let Commissioner Schaefer know of that as well. All right, we are adjourned, down in 601, public safety.